Now I want to visit about each of the factors by itself. Later on, we'll understand how they integrate, but each factor has some uniqueness that you need to understand about it to better understand the people behind the graphs. To start out with D's, the D factor measures problems and challenges. It does not tell me if you can solve problems. It tells me how you will solve problems. It does not tell me if you like challenges. It will tell me how you will deal with challenges. In some ways, maybe it will tell me a little bit if you like challenges, because the higher the D, the more competitive they are and the more challenges they like. But we must look at each of these factors and determine certain things about them. The emotion of a high D is anger. They're very quick to anger. Go down the factor to the low D, slow to anger. So when I'm looking at and walking and talking to people, or if I want to find out about one of your friends that I'm going to meet, one of the questions I could ask them, is your friend quick to anger or slow to anger? If they say quick to anger, now I know their D is above the line. I'll help you understand the rest of this as we go through. But you see that this helps us understand. We also must realize that the D factor is somewhat like a stepladder. We start on the bottom, we're quite mild, and as we move up that D factor, hey, we're moving up to a different type of person who's a little bit more demanding and caring about things that they want to get results from. We also must really pay attention to the fact that D's fear being taken advantage of. Wow, think about that. You're trying to sell to a D. You better make for sure you do not take advantage of them in that sales process, because they fear that, and when they fear something, they actually will do something about it at some point. And again, I'm pointing out this language of anger. So this helps us understand these people. Another thing of looking at the D factor, how will the Ds respond or react in an environment that is antagonistic? Marston said they would be active. So the higher the D, the more active you're going to be involved in an antagonistic environment. The lower the D, the more stay away, back away you're going to be in dealing with an antagonistic environment. In fact, I find sometimes dealing with conflict that the low D will use humor to sort of avoid dealing with the issue. But to a high D, conflict is like coffee in the morning, something to get me going. I love conflict because it's a battle of wits. And I would love to debate and have a battle of wits with people because this is the way things happen. Now, here's the other thing you need to know about a D. You can have a meeting and two managers really going at it, and all of a sudden one of them looks at his watch and says, hey, it's 12 o'clock, let's eat. They get up and walk away. They're total friends. They don't take it personal because they can deal with it as an issue and separate it many times away from being personal. So it's all about the challenge, and it's all about the fun. Again, later on we'll integrate all these things, but this gives you a little understanding of where D's are coming from. I like to think of the I people as those that are really into people, and if you're into people, they're into contacts. I never met an I on an elevator that going up 10 stories, we weren't buddies or friends already. They're quick to react to that. That's why they have many contacts with many people. And one of the things I talk about I's is the only behavioral thing where I'll really talk about something that could be classified as a value. But the higher the I, the higher the trust. The lower the I, the lower the trust. And this is an important factor in understanding how to work and interact with people on the I factor. We also need to look at I's because they fear loss of social recognition. So you could imagine what happens when you got an I that has really done something that was great, and the next thing they know, someone else has taken credit for what they did. That loss of social recognition, or if you're managing an I and you actually put them down in front of other people, it's going to impact how they react to you and how they react to their job after that point. So you don't want to really do these things with anybody, but very important that you really understand that from the I standpoint. I seek to influence you by being optimistic, outgoing, and talkative, okay? And the low I will say, where's the facts? Where's the figures? The high I will just keep wanting to talk and talk and talk and talk more. I've seen many high I's talk themselves in and out of business because they just don't know when they should stop talking. And by the way, we tend to talk with our hands. We tend to be emotional when we talk, and pretty much easy to identify. So if I was trying to identify somebody that I hadn't met before and I knew someone that knew him, I would say, hey, are they high trust or low trust? Now you notice I'm not dealing with intensity, I'm just dealing with above the energy line or below the energy line or the midline there. So it's helping me position, and then I'll be able to tie all this together later on. But these are important functions that when we start out by just looking at the basic factor all by itself, we can see how it runs and what we're truly measuring. Now let's look at what the S factor actually measures. Here we're looking at pace and consistency. Now think about the importance of pace and consistency. You really can't be consistent if you do everything real fast. But once you have a nice pace, you can be a lot more consistent. So the S factor, the higher you are on the S factor, the slower you are to change. The lower you are on the S factor, the quicker you are to change. So as we look at this S factor, it's a very important factor in all people. And we also must pay attention to the fact that high S people fear loss of security. Have you ever known a person who died and nobody knew they had any money? They drove old cars, lived in an old house, and they left $1 million or $2 million to the town or the government? I've known those people, and they were high S's. Loss of security. They're savers. They save their money as compared to spend their money because they must feel this security. Can you imagine how a high S feels when they read in the morning paper that they've laid off 10,000 people at his company at another location? Wow. Loss of security is very present in their mind. And so we must be aware of that. And this slow to change sort of comes along with that territory, all right? So by looking at the S factor, we can tell how resistant people are to change. But one of the things I like to say about an S is that S's are not necessarily against change as much they're against being changed. Now think about what I just said. If I plan on implementing something new in the fall, I go to my high S's and talk to them about it in the spring. I got this idea I'm thinking about, and I'd like your opinion, but I don't want your opinion today because I want you to think about it because you're a good thinker. I want you to think about this idea, and I also want you to think about what other impact it'll have on other things and other people. So I'm preparing them for change in the future, but I'm also getting some input from them. And one of my weaknesses is looking at the big picture and seeing if I make that decision over here, what impact will it have on the rest of the organization? I actually need team members to point that out to me. Sometimes I can catch it, but many times I don't. So you can understand that each of these factors really has its strengths. And it's by understanding their strengths that we're actually to accomplish great things. Now let's talk about the C factor. Here we're talking about procedures and constraints. Have you ever known someone that bought a toy and the first thing they did was open the manual and read it on how to assemble the toy? There's some people that never have read a manual. There's other people that live by the manual. So we're really looking at the C factor is how do you respond to rules and regulations set by other people? The higher you are in the C factor, the more you're going to respond to rules and regulations set by other people. The lower you are on that C factor, the more that you're going to respond to your own rules. In fact, in some cases, you'll even break your own rules. But basically, the lower C's look for things to do differently. In fact, it's somewhat difficult to manage a low C because they want to be seen as very independent and not constrained by rules and regulations set by other people. One of the things that they fear making mistakes. So now think about somebody who fears making mistakes and wants to follow rules and regulations set by other people, working for a manager who sort of delegates by walking by saying, drain the pond. They want to know what pond to drain. They want to know where do you want the water drained to, which end would I do it, what would I do with it, how would I drain it. All of those questions are in their mind, but because you think they're a great person and know exactly how to do it, you delegate sort of by walking by. I once had a high C assistant, and I would give her a project, and the next day she would come back in a show and tell, and she would show me what she had done and wanted approval. And, hey, great job, go ahead. The next day, a little bit more. And it wasn't until I discovered that I was a poor delegator to her, and I learned how I had to delegate. I had to be sitting down. I couldn't be standing up because my body language said, I got to go to that meeting. I got to get out of here. I've got places to go, things to do, and you're not important. That's what my body language was saying. My brain, because I thought she was a talented person, was thinking something different. So I'd sit down. Maybe I'd have a cup of coffee. I would then say, we need to do this. And I would delegate. And then I would stop and say, I may not have explained that very well this morning. And now I'd like you to sort of tell me what you heard. And wow, I couldn't believe the stories I heard. It was like she wasn't in the same room I was. And I had fun with that, but this lady went on to replace me later because she had the talent to really grow. And once I learned how to delegate to her, I would give the project, and the next thing I would see would be it finished. Saved me a lot of time. I was a lot happier, and she was a lot happier also. Can you imagine the stress that people take home from the job when they're confronted with a delegator who doesn't know how to delegate to them? I won't tell another story, but I could, of a recent person who the manager had a meeting with, and this person was crying every day, and we looked at the various graphs and determined the problem was delegation. Told the manager how to communicate that to her, and before the day was over, she got an email from that manager saying it was the best meeting I've ever had from any manager I've ever had. So we need to realize that we really can impact people's life with simple understanding of really who they are. The higher C, the lower the risk. The lower the C, the higher the risk. When selling to a C, you need to realize that they are going to have questions after you leave. And once I'd identified that I either had a C on the team that was going to make the purchase decision or that I was selling to a C, I would simply leave by saying, I know you probably have some questions that we didn't cover today, so here's my card. If you come up with any questions or any concerns in the next week, please give me a call because I really would like to deliver that. Also, if you make a promise to a C to deliver something that you didn't have with you, do it on time, remind that you've done it, because they have very high standards and they are not going to purchase from you if you don't live up to what you promise. The other thing I'd like to tell you is once you sell a C correctly, they're a customer for life, because the bulk of the world out there is not paying attention to what they really want when they make those decisions. But they will make those decisions in your favor once you understand where they're coming from. And I do have one more story to tell about a high C. I was doing research on farmers, and I noticed that the neighbor sold Pioneer seed corn, and I noticed that the farmer planted Pioneer seed corn, so I just drew the conclusion, neighbor for 22 years in a row, that he bought from the neighbor. And he said, absolutely not. Take one look at his farmstead, and how could you believe anything he said? Now, I got to tell you, I was talking to a high C farmer, and the neighbor was a high I. Their farmstead are totally unique and different. And later you'll be able to look at some slides of my research of ag farmers that will tell you that who we are, our behavior actually dictates the way we maintain our premises. It's how we plan to make decisions. It's how we plan to retire. This is all a part of our behavioral makeup. And I've been fortunate to do research on farms, retail dealers, homes, offices, managers, and I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I'm continuing to learn as we discover different ways and more assessments to add into our collection and view the data that really tells a better story than just what behavior will tell us. In addition, I should mention another couple of things about the C. Remember, they fear making mistakes, and so if you're making a presentation to them or a sales presentation, you need to cover all the data to make for sure they're not going to make a mistake in their decision making. The other thing about C's, you need to realize that the lower C is very independent, and you need to stroke their ego and talk about, you could make the right decision on this because you have the ability to grasp the whole thing. And here's a chance for you to really be seen as a leader in the community. The higher the C, the more their followers. And this reminds me of another story to tell about the C. I was talking to a C farmer, and I asked him where he bought his tractors. I knew the brand he bought. I knew the dealership around him. And what I discovered is that he arced around a dealer to get to a dealer that was similar to his style. This high C farmer avoided a high C dealership that was 8 miles from his farm to go to a high S dealership that was about 18, 19 miles from his farm. So understanding all of this, it starts telling us a story about their relationship with people. And you and I live in a laboratory. We can think about ourselves, think about our decisions, think about being in the checkout line, impulse items. We're people. This is the normal stuff that people do. And think about what goes through your mind, and then start talking to others and find out what goes through their mind, because you're on a path here to really discover the true important qualities of other people. When I did my ag research, I actually trained salespeople to drive by a farmstead at 55 miles an hour, which was the speed limit, and draw a graph of the farmer. What I was attempting to do is to prepare them on who they were going to meet. And then once we prepared them, we helped them with an opening bonding statement that we could make to the various D, I, S, and C farmers. And this really started a sales process that led to long-term customers. So it was based on research, and I'm going to give you some little tips here on how we could sort of profile somebody that we've never met. Remember, I talked about the D. Let's talk about the D. Are they quick to anger or slow to anger? If they're up or down, we're going to just determine whether the factor is above the midline or below the midline. The next thing we'll look at is the I. Are they high trust or low trust? Again, we'll raise the factor above the line or the lower line. Then, how about the S? Are they quick to change or slow to change? Are they the first one in the community to buy a new product, or are they the last one to buy a new product? And are they a stickler? Are they an analytical? Do they follow rules and regulations set by other people, or are they somewhat of a free spirit, independent, and want to be seen as their own person? So by asking about 4 questions, you can actually put the graphs out there, and then I can sort of prepare you. If I don't know whether I'm talking to a D or an I, I'm going to treat them like they're a D. I don't want to make a mistake with a D, but I's are so forgiving that if I treat an I like a D, they won't know it, and I can slip to I, and it's not a problem. If I don't know whether I'm talking about an I or an S, I would probably start out treating them as an S, because S's are somewhat forgiving also. They're really great about people, and we would help them, but to switch from an S to an I is just to get a little bit more emotional, a little bit more friendly as we go through there. And then if I don't know whether I'm talking about an S or a C, again, I would start out and act like I was calling on a C. So I'd be very well organized, prepared, have everything in place for my presentation. I always show up for a D or a C on time. Both D's and C's are precise about the use of their time, and they're both controllers. I got to tell you, a lot of people that are high C's are read to be a high D. You have to look, why are they controlling? We're controlling because I'm in charge, or we're controlling because we're going to do it the right way the first time. Major difference, and if you're an amateur at this, you'll be just looking at control. and you'll misjudge them. And if you try to sell a D as if they're a C or vice versa, it's not going to work. S's and I's have some things in common also. They're warm and close, and they're imprecise about the use of their time. Could you imagine a high I kid in school, 7 or 8 years old, has a chance to either go home, like the parents told him to do, or visit with a neighbor, or stop off at a friend's house? You see, they're torn. That I is such a people person, so outgoing, optimistic, likes to be around people, that a lot of times, and imprecise about the use of their time, by the way, that's why they're late with some meetings. So many I's have to learn how to do a little different time management approach by understanding themselves. So I hope you've got some idea that we really can, the more we learn and practice and try this stuff, we can actually anticipate what people are going to be. By anticipating their style, we can be prepared with an opening bonding statement. And then also, if we miss it, we can clarify it and move and still save the sale or the conversation or the relationship.